Hi, John from York Bay Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. As expected, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand left rates unchanged. Leaving the OCR at 325. Now that's the first pause in 6 meetings. We've had 6 consecutive cuts, and really the Reserve Bank, I think, is just waiting to see, one, how the recent cuts sort of affect the economy, but also as well, potentially the sort of global uncertainty in terms of trade with Trump's tariffs. But certainly there are encouraging signs in the New Zealand economy, and most analysts and economists still expect at least one further cut before year end, taking the OCR down to 3%. And then potentially, if the economy is still a little bit sluggish and needing a little bit more sort of a boost, potentially the OCR could go down to 275, potentially even 250. So sort of steady as she goes from the New Zealand economy, I'm saying just really waiting to see how these recent sort of interest rate cuts are going to impact on the economy. Now in the US, still pretty interesting times out there. The recent jobs data was a little bit stronger than anticipated. Came in at 146,000 versus about 110,000 expected. But what was interesting was where the jobs were gained, mainly health care and financial services. Interestingly, manufacturing was still down. So for all these boasts and sort of Trump's boasts about bringing manufacturing back to the US, that's not seemed to be happening at present. And just one thing on the US jobs data there, it was quite interesting that, what happened to all the supposedly jobs that were cut through Doge? Because certainly they haven't showed up in the data yet. And then as well, obviously, Trump has got into Powell again, saying, the Fed should be cutting interest rates. But, Jay Powell has come out and the other Fed officials saying that, potentially they could look to see lower rates, but they're just waiting to see what the uncertainty is re US trade policy. Because again, there's been another flip there. Instead of July the 8th with the tariffs coming back online, they're now going to come back online on August the 1st. But again, all the deals that were supposed to be coming through are really sort of few and far between, and Trump is now sending letters out to countries telling them what their tariffs are going to be. So the 90 deals in 90 days has really gone up in a puff of smoke and just disappeared completely. But then as well, almost out of the blue, he comes out and says he's going to place a 50% tariff on copper imports. Now, if you look at the manufacturing base in the US can produce around sort of 55% of the copper needed for its demand. The rest has to be imported. So if you're putting 50% on those copper imports, then costs are going to go up again. He's also threatened to put 200% on pharmaceuticals as well. So again, instead of bringing costs down, which supposedly he was going to do on day one, all that seems to be happening out there is the policies he's sort of implementing appear to be sort of showing a rise in prices. Now, obviously, he did manage to get the big beautiful bill through. Now, interest rates sort of holding steady. 10 years come back a little bit around 434. 30-year is around 485, and the 2-year is around 389. But interesting as well, obviously, with the recent floods in Texas, which were really pretty horrendous. Trump still hasn't visited that area yet. Instead, at the weekend, he decided to play golf yet again. Then there is still the fallout from the Epstein files, which apparently, he was going to release sort of pre-election. He was going to declassify them. They were sitting on Pam Bondi's desk, sort of waiting. But now apparently the sort of client list has disappeared, or didn't exist. So that's certainly causing him a little bit of angst as well, obviously, since Musk came out and said the reason why he isn't releasing those is because he is in the Epstein files. Now, it will be pretty interesting as we come into the reporting season in the US. Really waiting to see, obviously, what earnings is, but more importantly, the guidance, because for potentially some of the shipments coming into the US, potentially have 2 different tariffs sitting in there. Now, oil's certainly come back, currently around sort of 66.50 and change. That's not too bad out there, but it's just going to be interesting to see how it does trade over the next sort of 3 to 4 months. Because certainly gasoline prices in the US, despite what Trump claims that they are below $2, average price across the US is around $3.14. Now in the UK, there was some worries about the Chancellor of the Exchequer. She was seen with sort of tears after a recent sort of debate in the House, and the speculation was that the job was getting too much for her. Because certainly the UK economy does face some pretty major challenges. As the current government, really tries to dig itself out of the big hole that was left from the previous Conservative government, but also as well, obviously, still the sort of spillover from the COVID help that was provided to the economy. Now, the EU region will still no deal with the US, really waiting to see what August the 1st brings and what sort of tariff levels are going to be sort of imposed, or indeed whether they're going to be extended further. Because certainly as Trump's new name, sort of TACO, because it's not beyond him to sort of come out and say, actually, we're going to pause the sort of tariff implementation further. Now, quite interesting in Australia, it was a split vote, 6-3, to leave rates on hold. Most people expected the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates, taking the cash rate down to 360, but they left it on hold at 385. Now, certainly Australia's made some pretty good gains in sort of reducing inflation, and now it almost looks nailed in that we'll see a further cut in the August meeting. So if you are looking for income options, go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.